Yeah, recording is being started,
Okay.
and I'm going to mute all except Dr. Kubrici.
All right. Very well.
It's all yours.
Okay. All right. So welcome everyone to our session related to action research. This is a refresher, as I call it, a very broad overview about action research. So this is Mansoura Kerbici, as I guess you all know me, the chair of the Center for Educational and Instructional Technology. So throughout the session, you may type your questions in this chat box, and I pause. And Armando, you may read the questions, and also we will have time at the end of the session as well. But I don't want you to forget your questions. That's why I'm saying that because all the lines are muted, it's good to just type in your questions. All right, so let's move to the first slide, the agenda. So I'm going to provide a brief overview, kind of like a definition of action research, definition and history of action research. I'm going to talk about different types of action research as well as characteristics of action research. Then we are going to review the design, basically the steps, the general steps that we need to take if we want to go through some action research. And finally, I would be more than happy to answer your questions. So, definition of action research. So basically, action research is a systematic inquiry to improve quality of an organization and the performance of organization. Now, this organization can be a school setting, a higher ed institution, or even it can be just like a company. And usually it's designed and conducted by the practitioners. And practitioners actually analyze the data, and practitioners try to improve their practice in their organization. So it's very relevant to our student population here at the University of Phoenix. Our students are practitioners, faculty members as well are practitioners. So action research is very appropriate design actually for our faculty and students and alumni. And often action research results in immediate change because the practitioners are getting interested in addressing a problem in their own workplace. The result quickly would apply to the workplace. So immediate change is there. So the history of action research. So action research started with basically Levine, who was a psychologist at MIT, started thinking about a research design that is different from traditional research. And basically, he was thinking that this action research should lead to social change, social action. And he was thinking that traditional research designs, for example, experimental design, case study, all this design that actually we review over the last few months in our research methodology group, they are very slow, too slow, and disconnected from everyday educational settings or like some other workplace environment to have any quick impact on that and to improve the practice in different organizations. So basically, he was thinking that we need to come up with a quicker, more applied version of research to be able to immediately affect our working place. And then there was another prof, Lawrence Stenhouse. He was the founder, one of the founder of Center for Applied Research in England. He also kind of agreed with this idea, and he was saying that this is the quote from him: researchers should justify themselves to practitioners, not practitioners to researchers. So in a way, maybe you would think that this is an extreme view that he had, but the idea basically is that practitioners are really familiar with their working environment, and they have a good insight, and they can have some great information related to how to improve their practices. So basically, these are the assumptions that they have a great, valuable knowledge from their workplace, and their ideas should be the base for decision making. Also, they are capable of making, carrying a systematic inquiry and a research in their own on their own practice. Um, and then I thought that's interesting, the notion that research should be democratic research, and the idea of we should do in action research. Actually, the idea is that we would do the research with the people, not on people. So, as you know, like in many other traditional studies, um, we conduct research on subjects, and sometimes I know that we try not to call them subjects but participants. But here is a little bit different perspective toward research, that is kind of really collaborative effort. And we do the research with the people, with the participants, not on the participants. So that's like a overall idea and kind of history that how action research altogether started to develop. So I pause here if there is any question here or comment.
What is the difference between this research and the Sigma research? That's actually Sigma try to improve processes in an organizations.
Right. So this is, I think, mostly uh, grounded in the idea of like democratic collaborative effort, and also has a lot of application in educational setting, particularly, versus Sigma that I think mostly going toward organizational research. But we do have action research in organizations as well. But maybe the way that it formed the background of action research is slightly different. It's coming from this view of social change and liberation, and you know, helping marginalized population. I will talk about this further in the following slide. Um, so it's not only improving the practice, but also giving, like being advocate of marginalized people as well. Okay, so so there are two types of action research coming from slightly different philosophical bases. The first one, as I was just briefly explained, they are coming from this liberatory, emancipatory framework, thinking, telling, believing that we need to really liberate people, and this type of action research called critical action research. And they are looking for finding ways, uh, policies, programs, or resources that assist marginalized groups. Um, I think I answered something there. Okay. So the examples, for example, for that goes under critical action research can be related to, for example, disabled students, how to help them, or parents who don't speak English, or non-tenured teachers or prof. These are all underpowered people that need to have a voice, and the system need to hear their concern, and the practice need to be improved to address their problem. And then the issues are, some of the issues under this critical action research can be like racism, issues related to ethics, values, these sort of topics. And then I think we have some background noise. Okay. And then the second framework, pragmatic framework, focus mostly on daily basis practice that we have. So practical action research comes from pragmatic framework, focusing on issues on everybody's classroom or everyday practices in their workplaces, and they try to improve what they are doing on daily basis. And so in this particular practical action research, the focus is on making small changes on local basis. And the example is like, for example, if a teacher try to improve engagement of students in his or her classroom, or if the teacher try to improve the instruction. So as you see, these are the issues on daily basis that teachers are dealing with, and they just want to improve whatever they are doing, their practices. So I stop here because I think Ryan had a comment. Ryan, you may want to. I saw that you typed something there. Do you want to add your comment or talk about it?
Is my mic working? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So to Armando's question, my understanding of Sigma, like the practice of like Lean Six Sigma, is focused on process improvement within businesses and within factories and those types of industries where you're trying to cut out redundant processes and see how that affects the working of a business. Whereas action research seems it's not just focused on process improvement, but might be, like you were just talking about education. It might be changing a program within a school or instituting some, like within the counseling and psychology profession, starting a new counseling program within a community and looking at how that community changes based on that initiation of a new program, those types of things. I mean, it's much broader.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Armando?
Although we can argue that in an educational setting, let's say you implement a new program, Blackboard, for example, and suddenly students start dropping like crazy. So business-wise, you start losing money, right? And so in that sense, it may be similar to Sigma in the sense because not everything is just the pure education per se, because you got to get paid, right? The university, involve cost, everything costs money, and so on and so forth. So there's sort of a border right there that, may be a little bit of similarities. But I understand your point, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, there are some overlapping, obviously, Armando. So there are some instances that you can use either of these. But again, I think action research is broader and more application in education, although some organizations use action research as well. All right, so now I wanted to provide one example related to critical action research, and also before I further go to the example, when I talk about critical action research versus pragmatic practical action research, it's not a black and white. There are some overlapping, and sometimes researchers may start doing some practical action research, for example, focusing on some issues in their own classroom. But then that issue may kind of ended up evolving, getting more into politics and other social issues and turn to critical action research. So it's not that, okay, they are just clear cut. No, this is just like two groups, but definitely they may overlap, and kind of there are some gray area as well. So one example, there was this study that a teacher was wondering whether Spanish students, for example, are assigned to special education just because of like by mistake or because of their language. So that was the issue that teacher tried to identify. So this was like a very everyday issue that she was dealing with. But then as she started addressing this problem, actually the research that she was doing turned out to the little bit political issue, social issue, how minority are identified wrongly, or what are the biases toward students and minorities. So from practical action research, she kind of moved through critical action research, focusing on politics and social issues. So I'm just saying that just keep in mind that they are not like really black and white. Now, just one example that I have here, this is the study that a biology teacher and his student conducted. So there was this toxic dump close to school, and it was like a hazardous, labeled as hazardous dump by Environmental Protection Agency, and they tried to find out why it's there and why it's not being removed. And through this process of why they raised the question of why it's there, what should we do, they ended up with exploring different issues and came up with developing a curriculum together, students and teachers, related to science and society. So this is just like how a question can start from one topic and move up and ended up with a plan, a curriculum. So that's just one example related to critical action research. Um, Example related to practical action research. This was another study that the actually researchers who were also teachers, they were trying to address this question of how does student choice in learning activity and assessment affect their engagement. So they use these Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences and develop these activities that okay, each students have different learning styles, and let's provide them with their own preferred learning styles, and let's assess them based on their own learning style. And the assumption was to see their engagement improve actually. But at the end, once they went through all of this, actually, they figured that some students improved, but some others felt very uncomfortable, and they thought that that was too much freedom in a classroom, each going to different learning styles. And at the end, so they had this actually lesson plan that they developed, but they ended up realizing that they need to revise their approach, and they need to revise their assignment, and then they need to do another set of research. So this is just one example of practical action research and how it may evolve to another research, and how the action plan, which was their approach, the lesson plan, need to be revised in the next cycle. So I thought just example would be, I love example. I think always help you guys better understand what we mean when we are talking about different approaches. But the characteristic of all action research, as I explained already, they all take place in practitioners and researchers on working place, and the practitioners take a very active role in their own research. Uh, it is always involved in collaboration with other colleagues, educators or colleagues, and always focus on taking action toward changing and improving the practices. And also, it has this ongoing approach that like continuously you can collect data, and then you go to reflection, action plan, and the next cycle. Um, so you may, the reason that I listed this characteristic is because you may just say that, so what's the difference between action research and any other research? So not in any other research we go through this ongoing cycle of data collection, reflection, and action plan. And not in any other research we may collaborate with our colleagues and educators around us. So there are particular features in action research that are very appropriate actually for the practitioners. Now, as I mentioned, it has this ongoing approach. And also, action research is very flexible in a sense that you may start with a question, but then you may revise the question afterward as you collect more data. However, there should be a plan for conducting your research. So we cannot simply say that because it's flexible, there is no need for plan, there is no need for steps. And because of that, I provided these general steps in conducting action research. And these are taken from this resource that I provided down here. I thought it's just useful to know what are the steps. So overall, there are 10 steps, and I'm going over these with you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. So the first thing is actually reflecting on your own practices. Well, as you reflect on your practices, you would identify a problem or something that you need to improve, some issue, some practices that need to be improved. That's the first step. Then, once you identify your problem, you would need to go through literature review to basically identify the connection between your problem and the other research conducted and reported in the literature and the theories. And the reason that you need to do it is because if we are not aware of the literature, if we are not aware of the theories out there, we may just do research that is already done. So we don't want to really waste our resources and our time, obviously. So, for example, if there is a question related to, I don't know, identifying effectiveness of this technology tool in my classroom, I think this is a novel topic, but when I Armando, I guess we need to mute all the lines. Armando, can you mute the lines, please? I cannot hear you, Armando. So you are muted, but I think others are not muted.
Yeah, well, probably ensemble, but see when they get the full credit.
Okay, Armando, you're not you're muted.
Better. Hi, Raya. No, I fixed that. I think I fixed it. Sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's still here some background
Continue, please.
noise. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So okay, yes. Then we need to actually identify the literature, the studies in the literature related to our problem, as well as the theories backing up our problem. And then after that, we do need to reflect on our own experiences and trying to see how we can use the theory that we identify in the literature in our own situation, in our own setting. It's very important at this stage that as we try to reflect on our experiences and connect our experience to the theory and studies, record our reflection and share it with our other researchers, co-researchers, so we just be the right decision making. And then the next step, we do need to identify people that we can collaborate with them. They can be our colleagues, can be sometimes some externals, not in our working place, but they may share similar research interests with us. And then we would obviously collaborate in data collection, data analysis with them. And then we do need to provide have a systematic data collection plan that would include like how to collect data, what are our instruments, what is our sampling method, and what is our sample size. And then after collecting all of this, we need to analyze the data and learn what you have learned so far from your collected data. The data can be qualitative, can be quantitative. So often in action research, we have different types of data that we would collect and we compare with each other. It's like a triangulation. And then this is the step that actually is different and unique in action research, that we would create a plan of action based on what we collected and analyzed. So that's a unique part of really the action research. So, for example, we if in that example that the researcher tried to see if having different learning style and offering different lesson plan would help the students or not in their engagement. So that's what they learn, that that may create confusion for some students. So then their action plan maybe is just changing that a little bit, removing some of the learning style or providing some guided discovery approach, and then re-implementing the plan. So basically, the action that they have, the action plan is what they have learned based on the results, like providing more guidance, removing the confusion, and so that students feel better. So that's the action plan. And then, but again, the action research doesn't stop there. Once we have the action plan, then we need to implement it and see whether it works or not. So that's the next step after creating the action plan. And then after that steps, actually we analyze all the data, review all the results. It takes a lot of time to go over everything that we have collected. And we always, as a practitioner, need to look at the data and look at our context and come up with a meaningful understanding and conclusion. So the context is very important in action research. And finally, the action researcher would come up with a conclusion and the question that can be actually used for the next cycle of action research. So all these steps that I mentioned, this is just one cycle of action research. Can be one study, but then often action researchers go through next study and next study. They continue on until they feel that they have improved their practices as much as they wanted to. And this is the chart actually that I made. Is just like a cycle, as you see. The same steps that I just explained, you see that there are 10 of them, starting from the problem, going all the way to the last stage of conclusion, forming conclusion, and coming up with the additional questions. Now you see that I mentioned here main stage 1, main stage 2, main stage 3, and main stage 4. So these are the critical part of action research. So when you identify the problem, from that point on, you go to like identifying the literature, reflection, analysis, data collection analysis. These are the steps that you would take. But the next that perhaps is similar to other stages, the researchers, but the part that is very getting critical is the action plan. So that's the main part or stage in the research, in action research, coming up with the action plan. And then again, going to the plan and analyzing and assessing your practice, your action research, actually, your action plan, and seeing that whether it is meaningful or not. And then the last stage, I think, is very critical because that's how you wrap up your action research and identify the next plan for your research if you want to continue. And so I also wanted to show you that action research has this ongoing spiral process. So as you see here, there are n number of cycles, and it's just like continuous improvement of the practice. That's how practitioners look at their studies in their workplace. They are committed to improve their workplace no matter how many times they have to go through this cycle. But each cycle, as you see here, can be like one study that can be completed perhaps published, presented, and then moving to the next cycle and next cycle. So I stop here, and I just want to know if there is any question related to the steps that I just explained.
Apologize because I had an issue. I had to log off back on, and then that's what the noise, and I lost the chat log. So would you please, the people that were entering their questions, can you please, put them back in the chat? I apologize, but I lost the thread. And if you have any questions, just unmute your microphone and mute it back in, please. There's a question, Dr. Fisher, would you consider action research as a more detailed type of problem-based learning? That's one question.
Well, action research is very detailed, that's right, but I don't think that we just can say that problem-based learning can be one particular research under the action research. So action research is very broad. Obviously, but we do focus on problem. It's very problem oriented. When it comes to education, it's related to improving the practices. Yeah, but I would say that it's a broader than problem-based learning.
Another question, if they identified a problem in the classroom or school, the children would have to be involved. That's a comment from Elizabeth Young.
Right. If the question is related to the instruction and it involves students, then definitely students are part of that. That's the characteristic of the action research to really work with the research participants and to become very involved with them, to better understand the problem and better address their issue. Okay, I see what happened at IRB. That's a good question. What happened at IRB? Well, so I don't know. Like, Liz, do you mean that like IRB would approve this or not? Liz, would you like to talk to explain your question? So, I think as far as getting IRB approval, you got to explain clearly to what extent you would include your research participants in your study. As long as you clearly explain the nature of your study and why they are getting involved to this extent, I think IRB should be fine. Often IRB problems start when there is a lack of clarification related to recruiting participants and the responsibility that we give to the participants. So if we are not clear about justification of those responsibility, IRB would have issue with that. But Liz, would you like to talk? Armando, can you unmute her?
I did. Go ahead, please, Elizabeth.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I was just wondering, because I've worked with quite a number of students at a different university that all did action research. That was what they had to do for their doctorate, and they all used their children in their classroom, and they only went through the one cycle. And they all used pre and post tests pretty much, and some of them used a mixed study where they used qualitative as well. But I guess my question is not really that. I just kind of wanted to say that what I saw was that they didn't have any trouble at all going through IRB, but they did have to get individual parent permission from every student in the classroom, and they had to upload that with their IRB applications. So I just wanted to say that, and so then they wouldn't put it in as they would put it in as non-exempt, right? for the category.
Right, but also if the students are minor, then like under 18 years old, it can be a little bit tricky. And yeah, as you said, they need parent consent. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And Sarah, can you hear me? This is Phil.
Yes.
You were mentioning Kurt Lewin's research back in the excuse me, in the early days, and talking or listening to what Liz is saying. His research, which I found absolutely fascinating, where he's working with 10-year-old boys, would never have passed any kind of IRB, but they didn't have IRB back then.
Yeah.
Because the boys did not know they were a part of the research. He had permission from the parents, but not from the boys that never. They were in social clubs, as you know. But I had the opportunity. I guess it's been a while back, but I used to work for Kaiser Permanente, and we were instituting a process. It's not important what the process was, but we had 17 hospitals, and I had the opportunity to be the leader of that project, which spanned some 5 years, and we went through each hospital for the 17 hospitals. So each hospital was like a cycle. And it was really fascinating because I was working at my doctorate at the same time, although my dissertation was not in action research. I took a lot of data from that. But each hospital implementation was an action research project. We weren't researching the project management side of it, although that certainly was an interest, but we were talking about the people side of it. So everybody that was involved in it, the stakeholders were all part of the research and had a chance to reflect on each time stopping at the end of each hospital implementation and getting input from all the stakeholders, from all the participants, and look at the next hospital. And it was very effective. It was kind of exciting and a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the fact that you include everybody in your research and collaborate with them make it very meaningful and insightful.
Yes, it was very rich. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely right. Yeah. And as far as the IRB implication, obviously, if nowadays if you want to do it, you need to disclose everything, and particularly if they are minors, there are some issues as far as parent permission. It's just the regular practices that students are doing on the classroom. I think it would be easier to get IRB approval. So it's just part of their everyday learning, no additional intervention.
Right. But when I look at Lewin's work, he could not have, because he was essentially experimenting with the children by changing the leaders and creating difficult situations for someone that would never be approved today. And yet that research has probably been quoted by more people than any other research period. So.
Right, you're right. We have rules and regulation now.
Yeah, not so much fun as it used to be.
Right. But the beauty of action research is actually really bringing research into the context. I love that part of it, that we really look at our surrounding and pick a topic from our working place and come up with the action plan based on what we collected, and then again implement our action plan, and then we go and assess it again. So it's very applied. Now, does it have some implication as far as IRB? Yes, maybe we have to look at the guidelines, obviously. But again, I think if we be careful about how we explain things, I think we can get approval. All right, so now evaluating action research. So I mentioned that action research it may include quantitative as well as qualitative data. Often, action researchers don't go over very complex statistical analysis. And I'm saying often or typically, there might be some exception here and there. So because of that, so it because they are just going through descriptive of most of it and descriptive statistic analysis, they need to provide some evidence that, okay, these are valid or their measures are valid, but they don't go often through the complex analysis. And the practical action researcher particularly may not go through very lengthy analysis of theoretical meaning behind the qualitative data. Um, the critical action researcher may do that though. And the other thing is that the action researchers use multiple approaches throughout data collection and data analysis. So although they can use some of the criteria that can be applied to different approaches here in action research to validate their study, it can be very complex if they apply all of those criteria. And they need to look at their context really. So, for example, if in some part they collect some survey, and then in the next part they collect the data and analyze it, and then they go with evaluating their action plan, and then conduct a case study. So it would be survey, study, and case study all together. So it can get very complex if they want to go through all the steps and criteria for evaluating a survey study and a case study. So because of that, there are some particular proposals for evaluating action research. And these are from guidelines from Kurzweil that he suggested some questions for evaluating action research. And these are actually just the same issues that I talked over so far, basically. So the first thing is we need to look at the study and see if does the study clearly address a problem or issue in the practice that needed to be addressed. So it should be the study really related to a meaningful problem. And then the next question that you would need to address to evaluate your study is, did the researcher develop a logical plan for collecting data? Was it a systematic kind of approach, like the same as steps that I mentioned earlier? We do need to have a plan and follow that plan. Did the researcher use different type of data? Often the researchers in action research, they use qualitative, quantitative, and try to compare and contrast the data, triangulating the data. And then the next one is, did the researcher collaborate with others who had interest in the problem? So that was again another characteristic of the action researchers who collaborate with others. And the next one is, did the research actually lead to any change or solution or not? Did it improve people's lives or empower them or not? So that's how you can evaluate how well the action research was done. And the next one, and actually that's also very interesting because, like I said, is the action researchers are often practitioners. Did the plan of action contribute to the researcher's ability to better reflect on his or her professional life? So it has to be really kind of meaningful for the researcher as practitioner as well. So these are some of the questions that are suggested to kind of evaluate and address when you want to evaluate your study, you want to make sure that you meet all these questions in order to show that you have done a valid study.
Dr. Cabrici?
Yes.
I was just thinking that I know we are doing actual research on all our webinars and research initiatives, but I was thinking that with all the many changes that Phoenix, keep doing for improvement, it's like we should be in a constant action research mood, some sort of a cycle. I mean, we are a community of researchers, right? Practitioner researchers, professors.
Absolutely.
And then, so I guess somehow we, I don't recall. I know we are in the middle of the changes. We implement plans. We change this. We change that. I know we are. but I don't recall seeing anything that actually can feed me with empirical data, right? That's what I mean, right? About what is, if this change X actually produced Y or whatever, right? This is just a thought, right? I mean, I'm just thinking that if this is perfect, right, we should be in a constant action research mode.
The problem, Armando, is that we don't have access to all of the information. The changes that are being made aren't being made strictly based on research. In fact, most of the changes are being made on accounting principles. So, I mean, you can argue or you can only talk about one side of it, but we don't have access to a lot of the core information, and we won't have access to that either.
I see. Right. If it would be the pure sigma issue, right, then sigma would be just looking at numbers anyway, and if the numbers improve, they assume that everything improved, can be misleading.
Right. And an improvement in some cases may simply be how much money they don't have to spend.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's true, Murphy. But I also think that as a practitioner and educator, we can still perhaps conduct action research on changes to be able to inform the leadership about all these changes. I mean, that's what I believe. As a practitioner, we always love to improve our practices. I know some of the changes are not under our control, is coming from the leadership. But the part that we can do is actually conducting action research and informing them, because the leaders also, they are very interested in improving the performance of the university overall. And obviously improving the performance of the university would end up with a higher enrollment, higher retention rate, and higher income if you want to justify it financially. So overall, action research would help the organization improve the performance of the entire organization. So I strongly believe that action research is useful, and not only is useful, I think we should do it. And it's related to the culture of the organization. Perhaps it hasn't been done so far, but there is nothing wrong with us being the pioneer. Maybe we can start doing some action research, and I believe the leaders would appreciate that. And it doesn't have to be very large, just maybe a practice the new change in our classrooms. Maybe using I don't know, Blackboard Ultra. Uh, if we do the action research and report the result, I think we can end up with some meaningful improvement down the road. Okay, so and I also wanted to share that I added some additional resources to the website. Our website included some articles. There are some journals related to action research, and there are some useful websites that you may want to review. Action research networks and associations. Action research at some other universities I found, like Brown University, for example, they are doing some action research. Queen's University. So that's the thing that like I encourage everyone to start thinking about action research. Why not? University of Phoenix can also start doing these sort of studies. And also AERA, they have these action research special interest group. So go ahead and review these materials. I thought they would be very useful and meaningful for all of you guys. And then I find also this one. This website actually is, it's a collection of doctoral dissertations and master degrees thesis, all done by action research. So apparently this is like a live website that continuously is maintained, and these, you see the PhD, these are the degrees completed, and if you click on any of the links, you can access the particular dissertation. And I find some of them very interesting. So again, I encourage you guys to review some of these. I think these are great examples for perhaps for students, even sharing with the students if they are interested in doing action research for their dissertation. And that's it. But I'd like to hear about your questions, comments related to action research.
Mansoor, there's a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay, let me. Okay, so I see. Do you want to read that, Ryan? I don't know from where I need to start to.
Sure. One of the questions from Michelle is, are there action research style dissertations? How many times would need to cycle through the stages to satisfy the depth of a dissertation requires?
I think just to the cycle that I shared with you, there was just one cycle to go. That would be enough for one study. So once you collect data, you develop action plan, then assess the action plan that you develop, you're done. So you would go to you form conclusion and some new questions, but those new questions are good for the next cycle. So one cycle is just like that, like 10 stages that I included in this slide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to answer the first part of that question, are there action research style dissertations at University of Phoenix? I think there's been some confusion around whether or not we allow action research. I know I've encountered some faculty who have said, oh,
Ryan? Ryan, I cannot hear you. Ryan?
Yep. Sorry. Just going to the whether there's action research style dissertations happening at the University of Phoenix. There are, and I was part of a group that was evaluating unique or different types of dissertations at the school, and one of the conclusions was, yes, we can allow action research at University of Phoenix and encourage it as an alternative dissertation style, for example, rather than the traditional style.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. So one of the issues that I have seen sometimes in some action research is that like they stop after collecting data and not implementing action plan and assessing the action plan. So I think that can be one of the issues. So I understand it might be the issue of time, but definitely once we develop the action plan, there should be an implementation phase, and again assessing how the action plan was effective or not before finishing the full cycle. So I just wanted to add that. But as far as dissertation, I think it should be done. But again, there are things that are changing continuously. We are going through a lot of change. One thing that I can do for sure, I can say for sure that if we go through a validated rigor process of doing action research, then there shouldn't be any problem, and the chair and methodologists should be able to help you. Okay, and other questions? I'm just going over this tiny chat box. So I see there is one question for action research. Could you design a study based on a literature review? No. So the action research, in action research, you need to do the literature review, but definitely you need to collect data from your working place. So it cannot be just a literature review. And another suggestion is perhaps we could do action research in the special interest groups. Yes, Patricia, if you're talking about possibility of using action research as one of the potential design for the research teams at research labs, yes, that's possible. We can look at our own practice, obviously, in classroom or even within a research center and conduct action research. And I think that's it, I believe.
Thank you, Mansura. Great presentation.
Thank you,
Very
Ryan.
well.
Thank you. So next presentation would be actually December 6th, and that would be content analysis. Liz Johnson and Eric Bean, two of my dear colleagues, they are going to offer content analysis on December 6th. So I invite everyone to attend the presentation. I think they offer this webinar on, I guess in March they offer it, but I believe that there were some requests for them, and then they are offering again in December. So please go ahead and attend if you're interested in content analysis. If there are any questions, do let me know related to action research, and a copy of this presentation also will be provided in our website.
Thank you, Mansura.
Very well. So I'm going to stop. One more question? Okay. I'm going to stop the recording, and the recording and the slides will be posted in our SIG.
All right. Okay, everyone. So